Mm. So whatever we do together for the next hour, should be an hour, Chantal, no? Yeah, may it all become a cause for us to become fully enlightened in order to free all sentient beings from every form of suffering and lead them to the highest state of peerless enlightenment. So I'm here to review what Rinpoche said last night. Okay. Yeah, shouldn't. So I'll try to just go through the main points of what Rinpoche said. Actually, yesterday afternoon and last night, we were fortunate to have 2 sessions with Rinpoche yesterday. So yeah, when I started reviewing, I was thinking, well, Rinpoche didn't make that many points. But then Chantal gave me this transcript, and I went through the transcript, and actually Rinpoche said quite a lot. So anyway, I'll try to go through the main points in about 40 minutes. And then if you have any questions, we can try to clarify any doubts you have for the last 20 minutes. So, yeah. So Rinpoche started off with a nice little kind of not a segue, a nice little piece about his idea for cartoons. Remember? Rinpoche was saying recently he had an idea to make like cartoons, like for children to watch. Well, actually not for children to watch, for everybody to watch, but like with animals talking to each other about Dharma, having like question and answer with each other about Dharma. So then, yeah, Rinpoche said because it should be simple and easy to understand for ordinary people to understand. So I think it's Rinpoche's idea to, present Dharma to people who are not, maybe new to Dharma as a way to interest them in it. And then it should be enjoyable and funny. And it should, and thereby, by introducing people to Dharma this way, can help them not to waste their life, but rather make their life meaningful. So yeah, in reviewing the notes from the transcripts from yesterday, I think this is the main theme that runs through all of Rinpoche's talk yesterday is about how to make our lives meaningful and the importance of recognizing the important things to recognize that can help us make the most of this life rather than wasting our lives as we have done since beginningless time. So then Rinpoche has talked about lung a little bit, how a cartoon like this with animals talking to each other about Dharma, that would make people laugh. It can help Western students get over lung disease. And then he made this distinction between lung and lung. Right? So the lung, the first one, maybe many of you probably didn't get the distinction. The first lung is like when a Lama gives an oral transmission of a text. Like His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave, the transmission of the 18 Lam Rims over some years ago. Or like the other day at Nalanda, Rinpoche gave the transmission of the prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. So when a Lama reads a text and thereby gives the oral transmission that he's received from a previous Lama to his or her students, that's called an oral transmission or a lung in Tibetan. So that's not what Rinpoche is talking about. He's talking about lung, which you'll learn more about later in the retreat, experientially, or we'll have a session on it, I think. But that's when people get it's kind of like a wind disorder. When they're too uptight and they push too hard. And they're getting, other karma, of course, is a cause, but then they get kind of tightness in the chest or tightness in the shoulders or headaches. There's all different kinds of symptoms. It comes from kind of being too uptight, holding things, in your mind and your body too tightly and pushing hard. So by relaxing and laughing about things, then it helps relax and get over that kind of disorder. And then, let's see. Rinpoche said then such a cartoon should help people. Well, first, he mentioned something Lama Yeshe said, which is kind of nice. He said Lama Yeshe often, Rinpoche was talking about dying, actually, about, we haven't died yet. And he was saying that Lama Yeshe often said when he met old friends that one of the greatest benefits of not dying yet is we can meet friends again, which is nice. And then Rinpoche said, but if we in our lives we engage in a lot of non-virtuous actions, then maybe it's more fortunate we die. It's not sure whether it's fortunate to die or not. But if we use our life to practice virtue, if we engage in a lot of virtue, then of course it's unfortunate when we die. So that was that. Then Rinpoche went on to thank all of you, and especially all of the old students for coming to the retreat. Yeah. So from my side also, I'd just like to thank all of the organizers of the retreat and thank all of you for being here. I feel very fortunate to be here with all of you. Yeah. So thank you all. And then Rinpoche went on to talk about the value of sharing as Dharma. You know, we're here as Dharma students, Dharma friends, Dharma family. So Rinpoche talked about the value of sharing each other's experience in Dharma practice with one another, and how that's beneficial because we can inspire each other with the stories we have, especially the old students, you know, who've been engaged with and practicing Dharma for many years. Then talking about, you know, not necessarily the high realizations we develop, but the hardship that we've endured and the benefit we've received by, you know, following the Guru's advice and studying, meditating, reflecting on the Buddha's teachings and trying to, you know, offer service or meditate or explain things to others or read texts, in whatever way we practice, by sharing the benefit and the positive experience we've had with others, with our Dharma friends, then that can be really inspiring and encouraging to others. So Rinpoche was talking about the value of that. The value of hearing about other people's Dharma practice and the value of sharing our own experiences with others. So then Rinpoche mentioned even, you know, we can study many subjects, you know, like the Bodhisattva's way of life, or entering the middle way, or the ornament of clear realization. There's so many different texts to study, but it's important to relate all of our study back to the Lam Rim. Otherwise, it doesn't become Dharma necessarily. And especially to relate everything we study back to renunciation and bodhicitta and the view of emptiness, the correct view of emptiness. And then in this way, by sharing Dharma and relating everything we do back to the Lam Rim, then it all becomes a cause to purify our minds and accumulate merit, to purify our negative karma and obscurations and the stains, the taints of those, and also to accumulate a collection of merit. So then everything we do becomes positive in those ways. So, yeah. And then the third kind of main thing Rinpoche talked about was that the most important thing to do is to generate a good heart. To generate a kind heart, loving kindness, and compassion, and to serve other sentient beings. So then Rinpoche was saying, even if we can benefit only one sentient being, then our life becomes meaningful. Not to mention 2 sentient beings or 3 sentient beings or animals. And then, as Rinpoche often does, he listed many different animals and then many beings in the different realms. But saying how, you know, when we think about benefiting other sentient beings, I think Rinpoche is making the point, we shouldn't think, oh, if I can't benefit the whole world, then there's no point, and then feel like defeated by thinking, you know, in too vast a way. So we should think, even if I can just benefit one sentient being, then it makes life incredibly meaningful. And then when we think about benefiting others, we shouldn't just think about our friends or our family or other human beings even, but think about any sentient being, even as small as a mosquito or an ant. As insignificant as it is, then it's the same as us in having a mind, having the wish for happiness and the wish to be free from suffering. So then it becomes meaningful to benefit any sentient being. And then if you live your life like this, having a good heart and trying to use your body, speech, and mind to benefit other sentient beings, then we have happiness now in this life. And then Rinpoche talked quite a lot about how also at the time of death, when we look back on our lives, then we don't have any regrets, right? We feel satisfied with the kind of life we've led. And then Rinpoche said, he quoted His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Not a word-for-word quote, but just a rough kind of quote. He said, His Holiness Dalai Lama often says, if you have a good heart, then even if you have only water to drink, like no food or very poor food, and just water to drink, no coffee or tea or rice milk or soy milk or all those things like we have here, even if you have only water to drink or only a grass house, not a castle, just a grass house, still your mind is happy because you have a good heart, right? Yeah, so if you live your life with a good heart and trying to benefit sentient beings, then even if you know externally you don't have a lot of possessions, you don't have much wealth. I remember Shay went into, that you don't have a lot of money, don't have a Mercedes car, don't have fancy clothes, don't have high status, but you just have very simple life, just water to drink and even just a grass house. But still, your mind is happy. Yeah, your mind is happy. That His Holiness often says something to that effect. And then Rinpoche said that Kadampa Geshes always prayed that when they make prayers, instead of praying for many, many specific things to come about, they would always make the essential prayer that may whatever is most beneficial for sentient beings, may that happen, may that come to be. Right? So Rinpoche contrasted that with some people who, when they're sick, they make strong prayers, may I be well, may I be well. Or, when they want something specific to happen, maybe they want to go somewhere or want to meet someone or, want something more specific to happen, to acquire something or be free from something else. They make very specific prayers. May this happen, may my wishes be fulfilled. But as opposed to that, the Kadampa Geshes just pray, even if they're sick, they don't necessarily pray to be free from the sickness. Or even if they're dying, they don't necessarily pray to live longer. They pray instead that whatever is most beneficial for sentient beings, may that come to be, even if it means, my being more sick or sick for a longer time or my dying soon or sooner rather than later. That whatever is most beneficial for sentient beings, may that come about. A couple years ago in Nepal, also Rinpoche was giving advice to a bunch of villagers in Solukhumbu, and he gave the same advice, that the best prayer is to pray that whatever is most beneficial for sentient beings, may that come to be. And a very simple prayer, easy to remember. So then again, if you live your life with an attitude of devoting, wishing for the welfare of sentient beings day and night, then again, you have no fear at the time of death. And then Rinpoche made another contrast with some people who do lots of pujas and prayers, lots of practices to try to overcome obstacles or be protected from harm or try to free themselves and others from sickness, doing a lot of different practices to this effect. But then at the time of death, they have a lot of fear because they're being separated from their own body, separated from their acquaintances and friends, separated from their possessions, and they're full of fear, not knowing what's going to happen next. So Rinpoche was saying, and it can be the same with doing our daily commitments and our daily practice, that we can do a lot of daily, a lot of mantras every day, a lot of different sadhanas and things. But then if it comes to the time of death and we're totally afraid about what's going to happen, have no confidence in our mind, and in sort of the power of positive causes we've created, positive karma, connection with the Dharma, connection with our spiritual teachers, then, and we have instead, our mind's full of fear, then it shows that the practice hasn't kind of hit the point, hasn't gone to the point, hasn't hit the target. And such fear at the time of death, as Rinpoche was saying, is because of the ego, because of self-grasping and grasping at the I, grasping at the ego, grasping at the selfish ends. So Rinpoche said it's important that our practice, whatever practice we're doing, it becomes a medicine for the mind. So it becomes something that reduces our ego, reduces our selfish concern, increases our good heart, our kindness and consideration, caring about others. Then, if our practice becomes like that, then it's medicine for the mind, purifies our own negative karma, reduces the force of our afflictive emotions and purifies afflictive emotions, and then increases all of our positive emotions. So I'm sure Rinpoche will elaborate on that more and more through the retreat. So then Rinpoche told a long story, and then quoted one verse from the Buddha. So then, Rinpoche told this nice story, which he often tells about being a small boy in Solukhumbu, in Tamil. So when he was first ordained and being at the monastery in Tangme, I think. Tame. So being at the monastery in Tangmei, which is just a short way from his home, where his mother was, but being a little boy, Rinpoche is saying you just want to play all the time. You don't want to, memorize and keep the discipline of the monastery. So he would always run away to go back home. So then his mother and his uncle decided to send him to Raoling, where he'd be further away from home, so he could help him concentrate more on his studies. So then he went to Raoling with his maternal uncle, or uncles, I'm not sure, one or two. And then that was the first time he saw foreigners in Raoling, and they spoke like, you remember how they spoke? Yeah, so I thought that might be French. And then they had yellow hair on their arms, but they weren't Yetis, right? So then Rinpoche went into a tangent about Yetis. So Rinpoche was saying he thinks he saw a Yeti when he was a child. At one point, I think in Tangmei, he walked up on the top of the hill and saw a kind of person sitting on a stone, but then it just jumped up and ran very fast down the backside of the mountain into the valley. And then all of the village people were screaming and yelling with fear. And so Rinpoche thought it must have been a Yeti. And then more recently, Rinpoche told some other stories. I didn't get them all so clearly, but more recent stories about people maybe seeing Yetis. Let's see. And Rinpoche did mention, this is interesting, I never heard before, that he thinks Yetis are a kind of being which is in the retinue of the Yula, a local spirit or a local deity, who Rinpoche said protects and encourages people in Dharma practice in the area. And Rinpoche described a mountain, like a very rocky mountain just behind Laudo, where that local spirit or deity is supposed to abide. So like many deities, like Heruka or Mahakala or Haigriva, there's the main deity, and then they have a retinue of other more kind of minor deities that help perform different activities on behalf of the deity. So Rinpoche was kind of speculating that maybe a Yeti is in the retinue of this local spirit in that area. And Rinpoche was talking about how when it's coming at night, he was describing when he was a boy, they used to cut grass and pile it up. And then he and his Ngawan Samt and his other brothers and sisters would sleep on top of the grass. And then I think his younger maternal uncle was saying how, I think it's, when they're like looking after animals in areas in autumn, in different seasons, different areas, that they would build a fire outside the stone hut at night for protection and have a big dog that would go around to protect from like wolves and things. But that you can't see the Yeti coming out of the night, but you can feel the power of it. You can feel the kind of earth tremble and feel the power of the presence of, because it's a very powerful sort of being. So that was it about Yetis. And then Rinpoche went back to Raoling and seeing the foreigners and how he wanted to offer them potatoes. So Rinpoche often tells this story as well. He wanted to offer the foreigners something, so he took a brass plate that the Pali people usually eat out of and filled it with potatoes. And then his uncle told him, don't go, shouldn't do that, or it's no use, or I'm not sure. He told him not to go, but Rinpoche went anyway. And then to go to where the Westerners were camping, he had to cross a small river. And there were only 2 planks of wood across the river, so when he was in the middle of the little bridge, then he fell into the water. And then was bobbing up and down through the waves as he's being carried off, a swift mountain stream, being carried downstream. And his uncle's coming running from the house to save him. And then Rinpoche said it arose in his mind, even though he'd never studied emptiness or anything about the middle way view before, but it arose in his mind, kind of like that. I'm this merely labeled Laudo Lama. It's just a name. So what arose in his mind was the thought: this one, having the name the Laudo Lama, is going to die. Right? So you can imagine a 6-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy. Most don't think like that, isn't it? So then Rinpoche was saying, maybe from past lives, some causes created in past lives, right? So of course you can infer a lot from that. And also Rinpoche said there was no fear in his mind at that time. So that's kind of the third thing, right? And then, so the fourth kind of section of the talk was Rinpoche was comparing climbing Mount Everest versus coming here. So Rinpoche was saying even, in the part of the world where Rinpoche is from. Mount Everest is there, and so many people from all over the world come there to climb Mount Everest, spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, and train for months and years, and put themselves at put their lives at great risk just to go to the peak of the highest mountain in the world. But Rinpoche is saying, but if it's done out of attachment, then every step along the way, every step they take, literally every step they take, and everything they do in that whole project to go to the top of Mount Meru is just non-virtue. It's 8 worldly dharmas. It just becomes cause for rebirth in the lower realms. Whereas coming here with the Dharma motivation, just to do a retreat here in France, even though it's so much easier, but it's so much more meaningful because it all becomes virtue. It all becomes a cause for happiness in this life, happiness in future lives for oneself and for other sentient beings. So I think Rinpoche was making a really strong point how worthwhile it is to be here, and everything all of us have done to get here where we are now is extremely meaningful. And then Rinpoche was saying the reason for that is because everything comes from the mind. Most people don't realize this. This was another point Rinpoche made, I think, in both sessions, that happiness, everything comes from the mind, means every experience we have, and especially the feelings, the mental factor of feeling, whether it's a happy experience or a miserable experience, mainly depends upon what's happening in our mind, what's happened in our mind before that. Right? So in that way, depending on what kind of karma we create, whether we create virtuous or non-virtuous actions, then we have we have future experiences accordingly that are happy or suffering. So then Rinpoche quoted a verse from the Buddha, which I can try to paraphrase. Chonam Senki Jeba Deus. So all phenomena are produced by the mind, right? Semni Tsushin. So the mind is the main cause, right, of all things. So if you have negative minds, if you have negative attitudes, then you go to lower states of existence, lower realms, just like an ox pulling a cart. So there was some conversation about a chariot or a cart, but like an ox cart, an ox pulling a cart, like wherever the ox goes, the cart comes behind it, right? So like that, whatever kind of actions we engage in, the result comes along behind. So the ox is like us kind of deciding to do this or deciding to deciding to do this or deciding to do that. Just like you can think the ox and the ox driver, they decide to go left or right or east or west. They decide where to go, but wherever they go, the cart just comes along behind, right? I think this is how the analogy works. So similarly, we decide, with our mind, do I, engage in actions that are virtuous or non-virtuous, and accordingly, the subsequent result, happiness or suffering, comes along behind automatically. So Rinpoche quoted that verse from the Buddha. So that was it for the first session yesterday. So again, just to review, there's basically 4 main things Rinpoche talked about. First, the cartoons, the animal cartoons, and the benefit of presenting Dharma in this kind of lighthearted way. And then thank you to all the old students and the benefit of so many Dharma students coming together to share their experience with each other. And then the third thing was how the most important thing is to generate a good heart and serve other sentient beings. And then he quoted His Holiness and talked about the way the Karabek Geshes make dedication prayers. And he told the story about him being a boy and Rowling. And then he made this analogy between going to Mount Everest, trying to climb Mount Everest versus coming here to do retreat, which is more beneficial. And why? He quoted this verse from the Buddha, speaking about how everything comes from the mind. Okay, so 30 minutes are gone already. So now the evening session. So the evening session, Rinpoche, he basically, it was a commentary. The whole session was a commentary on 2 verses from the 5th Dalai Lama. So Venerable Namjong found both verses for me online. Let me just read the first verse in Tibetan real quick. Kyama, kyama, yanche, lotri, namyang, ki, tunme, tombe, mitsese. Kyama. Yeah, so Rinpoche didn't explain every word, but Kyama. So the first, anyway, it's first like expression, like a, oh my God, kind of, oh wow. Nyenche Lochi. So Rinpoche was saying from beginningless lives, from beginningless past lives, from beginningless rebirths in the past, through the force of distraction, we've passed countless lives. We've used them in a meaningless way, right? We've lived countless lives, and they've been to no good end, right? We've used them. They've been meaningless, right? They're void of meaning. And even many human lives have ended just like that, been exhausted, basically by following the 8 worldly concerns, by following attachment. Rinpoche elaborates a little bit later on, having the view that most people in the West probably have these days, that happiness comes from outside, unhappiness comes from outside. If you do that, I'll be happy. If you do that, I'll be upset. It's your fault. My happiness and my suffering is other people's fault. It doesn't come from the mind. It comes from outside. So thinking like that, then we look everywhere but the right place. For the causes of our happiness and suffering, and then we use our lives to harm others and engage in countless non-virtuous actions, and then it comes to no end. Tani Dutsim Mbe Nam Shagdu. And the reason for that is because the mind is distracted by anger, distracted by attachment, distracted by ignorance, jealousy, pride, all the afflictive emotions. I just wanted to mention here. The difference between distraction and excitement in the context of generating meditative concentration, the two faults are laxity and excitement. Excitement is specifically through the force of attachment, seeing things as exaggerating the pleasure of things and being attracted to them, and the mind being drawn to them that way and not staying on the object, due to the force of exaggerating the pleasure of things or the ability of things to please us due to attachment. Whereas namyang, as the Tibetan word here, namyang is translated as distraction. It means the mind the mind wanders off the object of meditation or whatever we're trying to focus on. The attention is caused to wander off by not necessarily attachment, but other things also, sometimes by anger, or by fear, by anxiety or worry, or just by sleepiness, for example. So it's a more general kind of class of mental wandering. But anyway, due to this kind of mental wandering distraction, we wasted so many lives. So I'll just to summarize. It'll take too much time to go through every word of the Tibetan, but. Just to summarize, Rinpoche was saying, therefore, in this life, we should put ourselves in a place where there's less distraction, where our mind can be undistracted. And then he was talking about monasteries and nunneries, why they're built away from cities, away from very highly populated places, so that there's less busyness and less distraction. And also dharma centers like this, and retreat places like this. They should be in a place, and the environment should be such that, that's why we're keeping silence, in the mornings and in the night, is to reduce distraction. In order to help reduce the likelihood that our mind is carried away in meaningless kind of directions. So Rinpoche talked about that verse, and then from there Rinpoche talked a lot about then the existence of past and future lives. So the second main thing Rinpoche talked about was, he said, I'm talking about not just this life, but beginningless lives. Do you understand? Not yet. So he's saying beginningless lives is something not yet discovered by Western scientists. And also karma, the law of cause and effect, is something not yet discovered by Western scientists, even people with a very high level of education, don't understand the mind, don't understand the existence of past and future lives, don't understand the law of karma. And then, then this view that people always think happiness and suffering comes from outside. Even, when people are sick, then the cause, doctors in the West always look for the causes of outside. Were there germs? Was there some pollutant in the environment? Was there some hereditary cause? They always look for external causes, external to the mind, not necessarily external to the body, but causes outside the mind and the karma in the mind. And Rinpoche is saying those external kind of causes, they can be contributing factors, contributing conditions to having sickness and other problems or, good fortune and happiness, but they're not the main cause. The main cause always is the mind, is the karma that we've created in the past, which of course comes from the kind of motivation we have when we engage in actions. And then there's a doubt that comes up. Well, if past and future lives come up, actually, once Venerable Namjong, years ago, we were in Dharamsala for His Holiness teachings, I think. And we went to Sojong at Namgyal Monastery. And then Sojong just let out, and there was a TV crew down in the courtyard at Namgyal. And they asked us if they could interview us. There was this kind of older, the interviewer, we're the interviewees, right? The interviewer was this kind of older gentleman with gray hair and long kind of eyebrows, and he was kind of obsessed with his eyebrows. He kept doing this with his eyebrows, before the filming started, he wanted to make sure that, the eyebrows are in order. And then, he was interviewing us, and then the conversation led into past and future lives, and we were saying, he asked us if we believe in those, and we were saying, yes, why, we do. And he kind of was, what do you say? He was kind of shocked, like, how could you, you look like young, intelligent people. How could you believe in past and future lives? And then we gave some reasons, and he was saying, yeah, but if they exist, you would remember them, right? Why doesn't anybody remember them? And then, we gave some other reasons. But later we found out that was Richard Dawkins. He was making an interview for Channel 4, for BBC. Then Namjong mentioned that he just read a book by Richard Dawkins recently, and he said, well, obviously it didn't help much. Like that. Anyway, so Richard Dawkins is a big skeptic about the existence of past and future lives. That's why I'm mentioning. So he brought up this question, which Rinpoche addressed. Well, if past and future lives exist, why can't we remember them? And then Rinpoche went into a kind of elaborate reasoning why we can't remember them, right? Rinpoche was thinking, well, think of all the things you can't remember. Like, Rinpoche was saying, like, I can't even remember what I ate a couple days ago, or if we think about, a year ago, what we were doing a year ago, today's May 12th, right? What were we doing last year, May 12th? Most of us probably can't remember much of anything we did May 12th last year. Maybe we have a rough idea. Or if we think about when we're young children, most of the things we can't remember, especially in the first 6 months or year, 2 years after we're born, after we're delivered from our mother's womb, we can remember almost nothing. We just know about those things because other people were there and they saw them and they tell us about them. So then Rinpoche was saying, but some people can remember their past lives, and he gave 3 examples. Well, he gave 2 examples of people who can remember their past lives. One was Khandrola's attendant, one of her lay attendants, and then Rinpoche told a story about how that attendant, I wasn't totally clear about this. The story was, there was one family living, like a wealthy family, affluent kind of family living up on a hill, and then they had a son who used computers a lot, and the son died, and then was reborn to another family that lived further down. And then that child said, "No, I'm the child of that family up the hill." And then with the child's family, they went up to meet the more affluent family, and the child went directly to the office where the computer was and remembered, how to use the computer or what the computer is and everything. Whereas in that life, that child had never seen or had any contact with a computer before. So as Rinpoche gave that as one kind of evidence. So I think that was the story of Khandrola's attendant, although I wasn't 100% sure. And then Rinpoche mentioned another story about an Indian girl. I think it's probably the same girl His Holiness often mentions, that there was an Indian girl who, again, I don't know the details of this story, but she was born into one family and then remembered being the child of another family and then connected with that family. And I think when she first met the former family, she could remember, many people in the family by name. And then Rinpoche also mentioned the example of Zina, who was first requested Lama Yeshe to teach Westerners. I believe that, sorry, Zia, okay, thank you, Zia, what's her last name? Rachetsky, no? Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so Zina is the one who requested Lama Yeshe, but this is not. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Zia. And who is Zia? Saudi Arabian nun. Okay. Or Egyptian nun. Okay, so this is not Zina, this is Zia. She's a nun from Egypt or Saudi Arabia. And she could remember being delivered from her mother's womb, right? Okay, first time she came to Kopan course, they did this kind of regression, not regression therapy, but like meditation. Like it's kind of, I mean, it's therapy, right? Meditation's therapy. So, you meditate on the continuity of the mind, how the mind has a continuity, it goes from moment to moment, and you can trace that continuity back in time and then try to imagine, the earliest moments of this life, then when you first, when your stream of consciousness entered the sperm and egg of your mother at the time of conception, and then beyond that, the stream of consciousness, how it goes back beyond that. So apparently doing that kind of meditation, then she could remember being delivered from her mother's womb, roughly. So that was another example. But in case you're interested, I mean, there's a lot of great evidence for past and future lives. But in the same vein Rinpoche is talking about, there's Ian Stevenson, done tons of research, interviewed lots of people around the cases of over 2,000 children who remember their previous lives. And then Ian Stevenson, and he published lots of books. And then his current protege in the same chair at University of Virginia is Jim Tucker, who's published 2 books so far, Jim Tucker. So both of them, you can get lots of books. Jim Tucker, you can see stuff on YouTube. And so if you read their research, and there's lots of really compelling evidence for the existence of past and future lives. Not to mention, there are many other arguments to establish past and future lives. Okay, so that was about the existence of past lives. But in short, this reason for past lives not existing because we can't remember them, it doesn't hold any water because there's so many things we can't remember. May 12th, our experience of May 12th last year does not exist just because we can't remember it, right? So just because we can't remember things doesn't mean they don't exist. And then the fourth main topic of this evening talk was the importance of purifying the mind. So here Rinpoche told the extensive story of Lam Chungpa, who's one of the 16 arhats. He's spoken a lot about in the liberation of the palm of your hand in the context of the 6 preliminary practices, of the first of which is cleaning the room. And the benefits of cleaning a room before the practice. So Shakyamuni, Rinpoche talked about even someone so ignorant like this, who he as a young person, he couldn't remember. He had so many obscurations in his mind that he couldn't remember things. So even he couldn't even remember 2 words of the teachings at one time. So Shakyamuni Buddha advised him to clean the shoes of the monks while they're in an assembly. So by doing that, he was able to purify a lot of obscurations. And then later he swept the grounds of the monastery. So while he's sweeping, there's this famous, I don't know the words exactly, I don't remember exactly, but something like, while you're sweeping the dust, thinking this dust is not ordinary dust, it's the dust of attachment. And by sweeping it, I'm purifying my mind of attachment. This dust is not ordinary dust, it's the dust of anger. By sweeping it away and cleaning it, then I'm purifying the minds of anger, or purifying my mind from anger. And Rinpoche spoke a lot about the importance of purifying our mind. And then he said, well, why clean monk shoes? Why not something else? And then speaking about, because monks and nuns, they hold 36 vows of a Getsol, or 253 or more vows, 300-something vows of a Gelung or a Gelongma. It's because they hold the vows, so many vows, that then they and their possessions are very powerful objects. So when we clean them or do something in relation to them, we create a lot of merit, and we purify a lot of obscurations. So it's the same with Dharma centers. And then Rinpoche went into talking about the floor cleaning machine at Kopan Gompa, right? And why actually that's not such a good idea. And I mean, long and short, Rinpoche thought it's not such a good idea to have a floor cleaning machine, because it becomes like, you turn the machine on and it goes around and cleans the floor, but it doesn't really become a Dharma practice, right? Because the attitude that I'm purifying my mind isn't really there. So like that. And then Rinpoche talked a little bit about how, the automation versus poor people having work, that is probably more important if there's a lot of work that could be done by people who need the money, need the income. It's better to give the work to them rather than just automate everything so that there's no work for a lot of people who need work. That was one point. And then the fifth main thing Rinpoche talked about was, escaping distraction. That I mentioned this earlier already. Monasteries and nunneries should be in a place where there's less distraction. And it's important to have places like monasteries and nunneries and like Dharma centers that have conducive conditions for training the mind by there being less other activities. And then at the end, so this is kind of the sixth thing, then Rinpoche explained the second verse by the fifth Dalai Lama. So both of these verses by the fifth Dalai Lama are from Jamba Shelung, the precious words of Manjushri. What is the Jamba Shelung? The sacred words of Manjushri. It's one of the Lamrims, the sacred words of Manjushri. It's a short Lamrim by the fifth Dalai Lama. So both of these verses are from that text. We're running out of time quickly, so I'll just summarize. This verse, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay. All right. So, so the first two lines basically says, again, from beginningless lives, and from beginningless past lives, through the force of non-virtue, we've taken rebirth in the lower realms again and again, countless times, and experienced unbearable suffering there. So isn't it enough? Therefore, from now on, so while we have this precious human rebirth and we have the opportunity to change our direction in samsara, going further into samsara and into the lower realms, or going into the upper realms and then gradually out of samsara, put the bone in your heart, which means generate sort of strong resolve to achieve higher states, to achieve higher rebirths in the future, and then gradually, with intelligence, the ability to discriminate between virtue and non-virtue, and gradually, strive to achieve liberation from samsara and the state of full enlightenment. Is in short what that says. That second verse said. Let me just check. Yeah, there's some other layers of meaning Rinpoche elaborated on. But yeah, like one thing he said was, don't be weak. Don't have a weak mind. He said, your mind shouldn't be like soft wax, that it can just be pushed around by the delusions. Like soft wax, you just touch it and it makes a fingerprint like that. Warm wax, you just touch it and immediately it takes the shape of whatever you touched it with. So your mind shouldn't be like that any delusion arises in the mind and you just follow it. You just do whatever the thoughts of afflictive emotions kind of are telling you to do. But rather have a strong mind, strong resolve, thinking, I'm not going to follow anger. I'm not going to follow attachment. I'm not going to follow ignorance and self-grasping and self-cherishing, but rather I'm going to practice renunciation. I'm going to practice contentment, having few desires. I'm going to practice, loving kindness and caring more about others than myself. I'm going to practice having compassion rather than getting angry at others. And I'm going to practice generating the view of seeing things as being interdependent arisings and empty of inherent existence, rather than grasping at myself and others having a true, concrete, solid, existence. and seeing things as impermanent rather than permanent and fixed. And like Venerable Rene was talking about, recognizing that everything passes away, including our life. We die, rather than grasping at this idea that we'll live again, tomorrow or the next day, or next year. But thinking, the reality is any day could be our last. So thinking from now on, making a strong resolve from now on, I must strive to achieve happy rebirths, so that I have the conditions to continue practicing Dharma. And rebirths, not just happy rebirths, but rebirths where we know the meaning of life, what's most meaningful in life. We can understand Dharma and make wise choices in our actions between causes of suffering and causes of happiness. Okay, so that was it. So just to review those kind of 6 main points in the evening session. So first, the first verse of the first verse from the 5th Dalai Lama was talking about how we have countless past lives in the past. Countless previous rebirths. We had countless beginningless rebirths in the past, and how many in the West don't know about that. And then the reason that just because we can't remember them isn't a reason that they don't exist. Many people can remember them, which becomes a reason that actually people do have past lives. And then he told the story about Lam Chungpa and the importance of purifying our obscurations by doing simple actions, offering service to holy objects, monks and nuns, monasteries, dharma centers, our gurus, and so forth, and thereby purifying our minds. And then the importance of going to places where there's less distraction for our Dharma practice. And then in the second verse of the Dalai Lama, recognizing how we've suffered so much in past lives through the ignorance, not knowing about karma, the law of cause and effect. We've created so much non-virtue and thereby experienced the suffering of the lower realms countless times. But now we have an opportunity to change all that and to basically to create the causes. We have the opportunity now to create the causes to go from happiness to happiness up to liberation and full enlightenment. So that's it. I guess I just wanted to make two small points I probably don't need to really, because most of you I think are old students, but especially for those of you who might not have much experience listening to Rinpoche's teachings before. Sometimes Rinpoche throws in a lot of stories and it kind of looks like it's not really sure where it's going. But it's important to, it's very helpful, like while you're listening to the teachings, even you can't write down everything. Write down just, maybe every 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, okay, where is Rinpoche now? Just kind of plot the trajectory, the path of the teaching. Because it's always a point, there's always a point, a broader point that Rinpoche is making. And it's not that Rinpoche never says anything just kind of unintentionally. Really, everything has an intention. So everything Rinpoche says, it actually comes together from many, many different angles and many directions and in many ways to make a very powerful point. So if you don't really keep track of kind of where Rinpoche is going and what are the things Rinpoche is touching on, it's easy to lose track of what's going on and not really see the kind of gem that's hidden in the teachings. Whereas if you kind of keep track and then after the teachings kind of think back, okay, what did Rinpoche start with? And then what are the stories he told? What did he say in the middle? What did he say at the end? How does that all fit together? Like, why was he presenting things that way? Then oftentimes, this kind of very brilliant way of making a message in a very powerful way becomes clear. But if we don't kind of think back over the teachings, then it's difficult. It can be difficult to see. So one is, it's good to kind of make an outline for yourself, make an outline of the teachings of Rinpoche's, each talk, to try to get clear what Rinpoche says. And then if you make a little outline like that, it can also just help to remember a lot better what Rinpoche said. Because it would be a shame, it's a shame just to listen to one talk and then, the next day, If someone asks you, like, what did Rinpoche say yesterday? I was sick. Maybe someone was sick and they couldn't make it. And the next day after lunch, they ask you, what did Rinpoche talk about yesterday? If you can't remember anything, then it's quite a shame. No? It's kind of a wasted opportunity. So then, well, maybe you can't remember, the whole structure of the talk. But for each of us, I mean, my review, what I've just presented now, is just according to what I heard. So my mind is completely full of obscuration. So I'm sure there's a lot of things I didn't hear, or many things I heard the wrong way. But this is the way I heard it, so this is all I have to present. But each of us will hear different things. I mean, one of the qualities of Buddha's speech is with one word, they can answer everybody's question in the audience. And everybody hears something different, even in their own language. So everybody hears something differently. So just as Venerable Renee was saying in the last session, also it's not just an intellectual exercise, listening to what Rinpoche says, but also it's a more contemplative, a more kind of profound heart, a heart exercise. Look at what you feel in your mind. When Rinpoche is speaking, if you feel something strikes you in your heart, then remember that. Even if maybe just remember one thing from each talk, but that thing should be what you feel is going to be most useful. Like maybe you have a problem, specific problem, something you're worrying about, some kind of hang-up, something you've been hung up about, something you're not sure, a question you're not sure how to deal with. And one word Rinpoche says, or one thing Rinpoche says seems to address that. But maybe at that time you're not sure how, but hold on to that. Write that down or try to remember it, and then think about it later in the evening, the next day. Come back to it and try to just reflect on that again and again. And then, it can become extremely helpful in your practice to remember those things, just those things that have a particular impact on one's own mind. And then the third thing is when we have opportunity to speak with others in the afternoons and evenings, talk to other people about what Rinpoche said. I always find it's a great conversation. Ask someone else, what do you remember Rinpoche saying last night? Or what did you hear Rinpoche say last night that you found really helpful? Ask the other people that you're sitting with and that you're talking, and you always hear something different, and you always hear something that you didn't hear. So you learn more that way by talking, and then by talking about what Rinpoche said, and then hopefully they ask you. Maybe it's my ego saying. Hopefully they ask you what you heard, then you can share your little insight too, but then by just sharing it with the others, it helps. By hearing what other people taught, you learn more, and it helps them remember actually what they heard. Because whenever we have an opportunity to explain things to others, even we think we understand it, but when we explain it to others, our understanding becomes deeper and more stable, and we can remember it better in the future. Because we didn't have just one experience of hearing Rinpoche explain, we also had the experience of hearing another person explain in their words, or being able to explain to someone else in our own words. So it's really, I'd encourage you during the retreat, after Rinpoche's, following Rinpoche's talks, talk about what Rinpoche said. And then it becomes really, precious, worthwhile, kind of valuable conversation. And it becomes Dharma, right? So it becomes a cause for happiness. So that's my bit. If there are any questions, maybe I can try to clarify any doubts you have in a few minutes.
At the very end, Rinpoche mentioned something about the extensive medicine Buddha and of the Fifth Dalai Lama, and said something about instead of a phrase fulfill the holy works.
Yeah, Rinpoche is talking about that a dedication verse for His Holiness Dalai Lama's long life. That he said comes at the end of a medicine Buddha puja that was composed by the fifth Dalai Lama. So I think we'll all get copies of that dedication verse. Is it in it's in your supplements booklet. That verse, is it? Yeah. Page 20. That little verse of additions and supplements for the prayers, it's on page 20 in there. So Rinpoche was just saying that verse, it's good because it doesn't just talk about His Holiness being the source of well-being and happiness for those people in Tibet, but for all of the world, all the world. And then I think Rinpoche made some alterations to the verse to make it more suitable as a dedication verse for His Holiness' long life and the fulfillment of all His Holiness' wishes. But again, it comes from the end of the dedication verses of the Medicine Buddha Puja composed by the fifth Dalai Lama. Other questions or doubts?
When
sorry, it wasn't really a question, but something that really it made an impact on my mind, which I didn't hear repeating, but which I thought was really powerful, was Rinpoche spoke about how sentient beings don't understand the causes of happiness. And so they don't have the karma to understand the causes of happiness. And even if you try to explain it to them, they get afraid or angry and run away.
Yeah, that's true.
And so how that applies to my own mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Did everyone hear? Yeah. Yeah, good point. Any more questions? Yeah, going through the transcripts, preparing for this session, I was surprised how little I remembered, how much I forgot already, actually, from Rinpoche's talk. So, I don't know. Will the transcripts be available ever to people? Do you know? Possibly? Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, then maybe we dedicate and have a break. So rejoice in all the whatever merit we've created together. And the merit created by all the other sentient beings like ourselves. And all the merit created by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and especially our own gurus. Sam Choram Poche Mai Ge Ba Nam Ge Yojin Ge Ba Nya Ba Me Ba Yam Go Ne